this guy, Donnie Douche, am I saying this right?
Yeah, you got it.
Douche, was an ad guy. And they would bring him on MSNBC to talk about politics. And I think Janine and I actually interviewed him in 2004. And I don't know, I can't remember the interview, but I remember being struck by, like, this guy has all the trappings of somebody who knows what he's talking about, but in fact doesn't know what he's talking about. And I can't even count up the times that he's been wrong on things. Here he is trying to parse about what constitutes civilians in the wake of what the UN has now called a war crime by Israel. They've also said that Hamas committed a war crime. But you don't get a get out of war crimes free card just because your opponent has committed a war crime. People have made, the point that, like, the Israeli Defense Ministry is located in a civilian area in Israel. That everyone over the age of 18 in Israel, except for the ultra-Orthodox, has served in the Israeli military and is a reservist for years after that. That doesn't, make them non-civilians, and particularly in the eyes of Donnie Deutsch. Here is Donnie Deutsch trying to make everyone understand that those hundreds of civilians who were killed, including dozens upon dozens of children, in this raid to get 4 hostages. We don't know how many hostages were killed. In the process of doing that, he also spreads misinformation that even CNN will not sign off on. And MSNBC apparently has no problem.
We have to start to really talk honestly about the definition of civilian casualties. 4 hostages rescued and 270 Palestinian civilians killed. We need to start to look at that word civilians. When the hostages are being held by a Palestinian journalist, a civilian, and a Palestinian doctor, a civilian, these are not civilians.
It is unclear, both those claims, there's been no evidence of it. The Palestinian journalist that he refers to lived on the first floor in a building, and the hostages were held on the 3rd floor. Now, Israel apologists will want you to have you believe 2 things. One, that Hamas cares nothing about Palestinians and are only interested in their own, survival or richness, which may or may not be true. But then they also want you to believe that Palestinian civilians have total say over the way that Hamas operates if they decide to put a hostage in a building.
They're collaborating with them.
You understand that those things are contradictory, right? So pick a lane and stick with it. But they keep shifting back and forth so that they don't have to be responsible for what the UN now says is probably a war crime.
Civilian and a Palestinian doctor, a civilian. These are not civilians. These are Hamas ambassadors. And yes, there are innocent civilians, but I think back to also the...
Pause it for a second. Ambassador is an interesting word to use.
Probably some of them are innocent.
We should also say that neither one of those claims have been established. You can Google some reputable news organizations and they'll say, this is what IDF has claimed, but there's been no evidence whatsoever for these stories. And it's not like Israel has not had a history of claiming these things as a way of obscuring what they've done.
Ambassadors. And yes, there are innocent civilians, but I think back to also the hundreds and thousands of rabid Gazans as they drag their corpse through Gaza, cheering, hysterical with glee
Pause
and
it.
joy.
Hundreds of thousands of rabid Gazans. I wonder if he's watched all the videos taken by IDF soldiers clapping in glee when they blow up things like universities. I wonder if he's read about that concentration camp that is set up in the Negev for Palestinians, where people have been anally raped with metal bars. I mean, I'm asking.
Cheering, hysterical with glee and joy. And it's just, once again, the media coverage is, and these were 4 hostages that were taken on a day that 1,200 Israelis were slaughtered, maimed, decapitated, killed in the most gruesome way. And I don't know if Americans had 4 hostages that were taken and we had a rescue mission. And yes, there were 270 casualties, and many of those Palestinian casualties are deep, deep, deep sympathizers of Hamas. Would the coverage be the same way? Would anybody be criticizing the rescue mission, or would it be truly one of heroism? But I do think we have to start to really...
Well, pause it. Let's think about this. Let's think about this. We had how many hostages in Iran for over a year and a half? What if the U.S. had carpet bombed everything around there? Put away the fact that, you know, we would be afraid of escalation.
The Iranians were sympathetic.
Do people really think that there would be everybody would be fine with that? I mean, the reason why there's no analogy is because we actually don't do that. We've killed hundreds of thousands in the Iraq War. But the idea that the U.S. public would be okay with 275 people being killed, children being killed, innocent civilians being killed, that number of people who had absolutely no way of fighting back. I mean, innocent civilians, I mean, like they don't have weapons. Does he really think the American public would be like, there'd be nobody talking about this? They'd all just be cheering and celebrating? I don't necessarily have the highest regard for the broad, the totality of the American public. I remember Lee Greenwood, but I don't think so. I don't think so. And let's be clear. This is not terribly dissimilar from what bin Laden's justification was for the Twin Towers.
Yep.
I mean, how much of a protest was there, when we overthrew Mossadegh? How much of a protest has there been in this country about supporting Saudi Arabia? How much of a protest was there when we, poured money into Afghanistan? Threatened the Taliban? I mean, aren't we deeply sympathetic with the U.S. government as American citizens? That's the logic that he's using here. Continue.
Or would it be truly one of heroism? But I do think we have to start to really talk honestly about the definition of civilian casualties.
Wow. If you ever find me trying to parse civilian casualties, and even in the kindest, most charitable perspective on what Donnie Douche is saying here. Let's just say we're going to constrain it to the 50 some odd kids or 60 kids who were killed. Do we feel better now? No adults. What about just like 8-year-olds or younger?
Well, you got to ask them what they feel about Hamas.
When you have to start parsing in this way, that's when you know how twisted things have become. We really need to redefine what we mean when we say civilians.
Says guy who inherited a marketing company.
I mean, that's really he should read some history. You start to define like who are civilians and who are combatants. Who are civilians and who are really actually just enemy. Really twisted stuff. Hey folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.